welcome. It is the third conversation of, I guess, a series of what does nature mean to you. And had some lovely chats last week. Hi, Courtney. Hi. Had the lovely Mark Oughton on, a conservationist, and incredibly passionate and enthusiastic about nature. And then Alison Harris, who's a wellbeing coach, who shared some wonderful advice and tips for us as well. So lots of lovely feedback from those chats. I'm really glad you're enjoying them. I'm really enjoying listening and being inspired. A lot of the work that I'm doing at the moment when I'm not in the forest is sat at the laptop, and I'm really feeling that. And it's so nice to have started these chats to hopefully inspire you, but also it's inspiring me, so feeling quite lucky. I've got a whole bunch of amazing speakers, guests, chatters to join me. And tonight I'm very excited. I've got James Canton, who is the author of the Oak Papers, and I can see that he's just joined the chat. Hi James. I'm going to see if I can invite you, or you might, James, have to request to join. So if you can see a little button, there we go. Here we go.
Work. It's been seamless so far. Yay! Hello, James.
Hi Ruth, how you doing?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. I realise I'm in the darkness here, whereas you've got this lovely backdrop of woodland, and yeah, very good, very good.
It's light and dark. Light and dark.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of that. I could put some lighting on probably, but I'm just sitting here on a Monday evening, I'm afraid. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Whatever makes you comfortable.
Yeah, it's a bit of that. There's a bit of that, isn't there? So how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. It's funny. This is what the third live chat that I've done, and I still get really nervous every time. Don't know why, just do. So if you're feeling that, don't worry, you're not alone.
Yeah, no, it's a little bit of nerves is a good thing, I think. Because we were meant to be meeting. Was it next week in the woods?
We were up by the oak tree.
Yeah, I know, and that's been slightly scuppered for the moment. So it's nice to do this as well. That's really good shout of yours, I thought. Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much for joining me. Really excited. I know we won't be able to chat about everything that we want to chat about tonight, but very glad that you are here. But I wondered maybe if you could introduce yourself to everyone.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm James Canton. The reason I'm kind of here is kind of because of this book, The Oak Papers, which came out back in July. It was really about my time spent with oak trees, one 800-year-old oak tree in particular, that I spent a lot of time next to, the Honeywood Oak on the Marks Hall estate in Essex, in Coggeshall in Essex. That was back in 2012 that I started sort of sitting by that oak, and it's been a long journey. I teach at the University of Essex. I've got a great title, Director of Wild Writing there, which is I really like that title. It sounds very grand, but it's basically about teaching a master's course, an MA course in wild writing, which looks at literature and landscape and the environment. And so those are my kind of twin reasons, I guess, for kind of hanging out with people like yourself, Ruth, and spending as much time as possible in the woods. I'm very much a kind of, I like being at university, and it's fantastic to meet people there, but my natural habitat is not indoors, really. I'm better in the woods, as we all are, as we know, kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, I suppose that kind of almost leads me into, I've been asking everyone roughly the same three questions.
Yeah, cool. Okay.
The first of which being, what is your earliest memory of connecting to nature in some way?
Yeah, that was a really good question, because I was kind of, I think a lot. Okay, so if I think back, I'm not one of those brilliant people that can kind of go, I remember when I was 3 and I met this, you know, elk in the woods or something, you know. But because I was very much a suburban kid. I was brought up in, you know, in suburban West London, and we were very fortunate that so I very much remember moving house when I would have been about 5. And the kind of experiences on the back of that, of suddenly having a big garden, or a much bigger garden, and it was a really wild garden. There were lots of wasps' nests, lots of ants, lots of insect life. It was kind of crazy and really cool. And I spent a lot of time as a young kid, kind of hanging out with the wildlife a little bit in this suburban garden. So I think one thing that I really remember is a pear tree, and I used to go and climb and sit in this pear tree a lot. That was really nice. I just had a little sort of place where I could just kind of hang out there, and I could look over the neighbors, and, you know, just kind of like keep an eye on everything that was going on. And but, you know, and then after a while, my dad built a pond, and that was just such a cool thing. That was like one of the best things. And when I was a bit older, when I was kind of like 12 or 13, I really remember doing a project. We had to, from school, I don't know quite why, but you had to go off and do a project. And my project, I suddenly realized my project could be just sitting by the pond, studying the pond for a week. So I was kind of like quite into that kind of thing from a fairly young age. And I had a fantastic experience a few years ago with my 2 daughters here, where we dug our own pond, and I kind of mimicked what my dad had done on a smaller scale. But so yeah, I mean, I think, you know, I've been thinking about it a lot recently. I think we can do so much with that kind of like with the small garden plot, you know, just with having a small bit of land that we're kind of in charge of as a human in some sense, and by like not mowing it all, and by growing wild flowers, and, you know, that kind of thing. I think it can be hugely significant, both for children, you know, and that kind of child state, but also in a kind of wider kind of climate emergency type narrative. I really do think that it is something that you can feel like you're doing something. Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely something, and certainly in what I do as well, we talk about when you connect, you're moved to protect. And when you connect, there's kind of that love or compassion, or that stronger connection. And by default, really, you probably end up doing actions that are helping and are contributing to, hopefully, healing nature.
Yeah, I think that's very well put. I mean, there's been a lot said about this, but I think it's so true that if you don't connect with the natural world at a young age, and if we don't enable our children to do that, you know, and the next generations to do that, once you don't have that connection, you have no affinity for it in a really kind of fundamental way. And I think we do see that, you know, and you can have a kind of deficit from nature that's been kind of proven now, and we kind of know this. We do know this, and it's a very good question, because it's quite a simple question on one level of just kind of, what do you do? You know, when did you first get connected with nature? But, you know, I mean, and I know, because I live out now in rural Essex, and, you know, just pretty much live in a field most of my time, and it's very different from a suburban existence. But I realized that even in that suburban existence, the outdoor space was very key to me. It was very, very much. Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, that almost leads up wonderfully to the next question of, what does nature mean to you? And I was kind of adding in, and what does nature mean to you, and how has that changed this year? But actually with you, I kind of wanted to take it a step back and say, what does nature mean to you, and how did that change as you went through your writing process of the Oak Papers?
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, I think, what does nature mean to you? That's a tricky one, isn't it? I mean, it kind of, in a sense, it means everything, doesn't it? I think, you know, on one level, I think what nature means to me is a kind of deep, kind of calm feeling of just feeling right, feeling happy, feeling contented with the world on a kind of immediate present tense level that I just don't think you get elsewhere. You know, you kind of, you know, you get it with screens to a certain extent, you know, but it's not the same. It's just not the same as being embedded in some landscape. And that's my favorite. I mean, you know, it's quite I think often the way that that I've done that has been quite kind of solitary. I wouldn't necessarily say lonely, because I don't feel that loneliness, and there's an important distinction. But nature for me can be a place to go to, yeah, to kind of feel good, to feel good, to step away from humans sometimes can feel a really kind of good thing to do, in the sense that then when you return to humans, you are a better person. And that sounds like how does that process take place? I don't quite know, but it definitely happens. And certainly some of my, you know, fondest experiences in the writing process have been that sense of taking yourself away. I did that quite a lot with my last book, with a book called Ancient Wanderings, where I took myself off to various parts of Britain and looked at the prehistory of existence there. And then with Oak Papers, because it's been such a long project in a really lovely way, you know, it started from 2012 and me kind of immersing myself in the, if you like, in the ecosystem of the oak. And it became, that was my initial idea, in initial concept, was to go and just sit next to an ancient oak tree and just spend the time there, just observe in a really old school way of nature writing. Just observe, learn, read books, do the study, spend the time. You know, I'd just been starting to teach the MA in wild writing, and you know, I knew quite a lot of the literature, but I kind of wanted to get a more intuitive and deeper sense of the natural world in my experience, really, and in my reading. So that was part of the process, really, of the Oak Papers in its first stages, in its first years, and it was just wonderful. I mean, it is a joy and a wonder to just go, to have an excuse in everyone's eyes, to a certain extent, to just go and sit next to something that you want to spend time with. And an 800-year-old oak tree is a really, really fine living being to go and sit by. It makes you feel very, very kind of humble in a genuine sense. And I think people, you know, we get that. You know, there's something deeply kind of atavistic, I think, in the sense in which we relate to ancient oak trees. Yeah, and so that was kind of how I spent a lot of time, really. Every now and again, I mean, I was still working pretty much full time in a secondary school, so I was kind of busy, you know, young children, teaching at the University of Essex. So it was also a space of kind of quiet contemplation, if you like, a kind of stepping out space on the Marks Hall estate. Yeah. And it's a beautiful little estate. I know you know it, Ruth, and it really is a gorgeous place where you can, I mean, I was spending time next to this oak, but then I could, if I wanted to, I could just kind of get up and walk away and just take a stroll. There's beautiful lakes, beautiful woodlands, you know, do a bit of bird watching or whatever, and then just come back to the oak and just see at all times, day and night. That was the other thing, all weathers, all, you know, all seasons. Spending that time by the oak was really an amazing experience. I mean, some of the things, you know, with, like, I think some of the wildlife that I met, I remember just having kind of tree creepers kind of flying into their nest right next to me, which was, and I was just sort of sat on the oak at that point. It was just amazing, that spring a couple of years ago, or 3 years ago now. Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it was a beautifully immersive process of stepping back into a natural world, and then accompanied by a huge amount of time spent in places like the British Library, doing the research into the nature of our relationship as humans with oak trees through the centuries. And through the millennia, really, I should say, for thousands and thousands of years. So that was a kind of an additional kind of joy, getting lost in the woodlands of the libraries as well. and our past cultures. Yeah. So that was me with this book, and it's yeah, it was really good. It was really good. And then I was kind of chatting. I kind of had lots of fantastic conversations with some amazing humans that spend a lot of time in woods and that study, people, lots of woodmen and woodwomen that I went and spoke to, some more spiritual than others, if you like. And that was really interesting, kind of getting their take on ancient oaks and the relationship between humans and oaks from a very sort of practical position. And then spoke to people like psychologists, environmental psychologists, who could talk about the physical effects that take place when you put EEGs on people and send them into green spaces, and you can prove that they feel calmer, and as the term goes, they step into meditative states, which is a beautiful kind of scientific term to be using, I think. So yeah, those were some of the ways that I kind of stepped into nature, if you like, in the process of writing the oak papers. Yeah,
it really struck me in particular that obviously the nature of what you were doing, and of course some academic study in there, and information and history and even myth and legend, but then getting to that point where I think it was the more spiritual approach, perhaps was it a lady called Sarah that said about perhaps stop intellectualizing and now just be the oak. And that really stood out for me, because it reminded me a little bit of what happens with, I guess, the approach I take, is that, of course, knowing everything about an oak or any part of nature can be a key into learning so much, and that's wonderful, and definitely not wrong or right or anything like that. But there's a whole nother way or level of connecting that becomes that just being, and letting go of perhaps labeling or finding reasons or all those things that, as I said, are valid. But when you step into that just being, and what difference that makes, and I could see that journey and certainly how you wrote it as well, and see how perhaps that changed, even though in some ways you were kind of on that journey anyway. It just seemed like quite a pivotal moment in your exploration.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. I mean, Sarah is a fantastic, she's a good friend, and she's a fantastic spirit of the woods, really, in many ways. She really is. She's, she practices kind of spirituality in the woods herself, and she was just brilliant at kind of, because I was asking her particularly about kind of meditative practice, the kind of meditative practice she practiced in the woods. And I was trying to get a kind of comparison. I'd read a certain amount and practiced a certain amount of kind of Buddhist meditation, and had spoken to, a really cool Buddhist guy who was, read a certain amount about how you can do Buddhist practice by walking, and then by sitting next to an oak tree, which is what a kind of practice that I tried to kind of hone to a certain extent. And Sarah was great, because she is really good at it. She's very visceral, and she just literally was kind of like, James, you just got to feel it, drop the intellectualization. And I was kind of like, oh God, yeah, okay, good, yeah, all right, this is really cool. And I think she was absolutely right, and as you say, I was very much on that path to a certain extent anyway. I think anyone who spends enough time in woods recognizes the effect it has on the human, being, on our well-being, so it, but it was very good of her, I think, to kind of emphasize the point at that moment. She just brought me a coffee. We were sitting in my office, and I was kind of, oh, Sarah, can I just ask you about? It's like, just feel it, It's like,
yeah, it's that stop thinking, stop doing, and just be, isn't it? So I wonder, with all of that, and that obviously that journey and that deep connection over many years, have you changed in any way, or noticed a change in your connection this year, which has obviously been quite a different year? Has that changed for you in any way?
I'm not sure. I mean, in many ways, I think, we've all been, it's kind of reinforced, I think, for all of us, hasn't it? the importance of the natural world. I mean, we are of the natural world, I always say that, but, you know, the importance of being in nature on a daily basis. You know, I mean, you know, my kind of day-to-day life has changed in that I sit here and do my university teaching at the kitchen table, and that's, you know, that's a shame in many ways that I cannot be kind of physically meeting up with people in the seminar. But what it has allowed me is a lot more time being outside, just nipping out, sorting the field out, you know, this kind of thing. But I think particularly in those early days of lockdown one, as we're now kind of calling it, you know, from March and April, when we were all kind of on our own, I feel fortunate very much that where I live, in that it is very rural, and to that extent I wasn't missing a kind of human cultural dimension, because it doesn't exist here. You know, it's there's a few roads, there's, you know, and suddenly those roads were completely empty, as we all experienced. You know, there was a kind of wonder after a while, I have to say, about not having planes in the sky, and we all started to see the, you know, the clarity of the air quality, you know, and this kind of aspect, that they were genuine positives to the shutting down of the human, you know, system, if you like, and those, I think we need to recognize them. We really do need to recognize them. It's, you know, we also know that we are humans, that we are social beings, and that we need to be in touch with other humans. And I, like everyone else, I was out doing my walks and stopping and chatting to anyone that I happened to meet on the footpaths, which was great, you know. And there was a kind of loveliness in that, and that's not to diminish the you know, the appalling nature of what a lot of people have had to go through in the last you know, months now. But there was an upside, and that was the genuine sense in which I think humans were recognizing the significance of the connection with nature, and yeah, and to a certain extent being given the capacity to step into that world. I mean, as I say, I come from London, and I think, you know, speaking to people in London, you know, family in London, I think it has been a very different experience in London. But even there, and in other urban centres, people have gone to the parks. You know, they have literally flocked to the green spaces for that sense of peace, calm, well-being, whatever you want to call it, that we get by being in those spaces. And I think that was yeah, that was really noticeable. I think that was really noticeable, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and there was, as you say, perhaps some lessons somewhere in that to be learnt, without, as you say, not taking away from the awful circumstances and the many, you know, people suffering from that. But I guess that kind of moves on to the final question, really, of whether you would have any advice for people, as we're, you know, currently in another lockdown here in the UK and moving into winter, whether there's any sort of general advice and connecting to nature, what you might say to people watching.
Yeah, well, it's very good, isn't it? I think it's a very good question. I think the key thing, one of the key things, particularly, I really, you know, like all of us, I really noticed that you know, with the clock change, the loss of light, and, you know, we've had a few grey days and kind of grisly, kind of gnarly, kind of dreary days, or whatever you want to call them. And I think on those days, especially, even more so, I need to get myself outside. And, you know, that's always my advice is if you're, you know, especially if you're feeling not great in terms of your mental health, your well-being, even more so, get yourself outside, get yourself to a space where you know, like I particularly for me, going to a tree, going to an oak, and just getting to know it it sounds kind of strange in some ways, but getting to recognizing it as an individual living being, I think that's the thing for me. It was a big breakthrough with me with the book. It sounds bonkers, but I hadn't connected with the fact that every tree is an individual, and that's then startling. I think once you do that, you just start noticing, and it's really nice. And some of the best comments I've had about the oak papers I've had have been from people saying, I can't walk past a tree now without looking at it and seeing its individuality, and that's just beautiful. And I think that on one level, just making yourself see those things or recognizing that in nature is very good, because it draws you out of yourself as a single human being and your own introspections, and you recognize that, you know, there are millions of other living creatures around us, and to connect with them as well as our own species can be a very, very, very positive thing, I think.
Yes.
Find your local oak. Find your nearest.
Find your local oak. Get that on a t-shirt. No, that very much resonates with me, and certainly there's trees that I've become quite friendly with, I guess, is the way that you describe it, and they feel like old friends, and when I see them, I feel like I have to go up and say hello now. I want to, and it would be weird not to, just the same as if someone was walking across the street behind you. And there's, I think, it's something comforting in that too, especially perhaps when there's a lot going on in the world or your own personal circumstances.
Yes, right.
There can be that comfort in that constant and that reminder that, as you said, there's lots of other things and bigger than us and older than us, and there's something, as you said, I think right near the beginning, quite humbling, which can be quite helpful to many of us, I think. So find your local oak. I like it.
No, very well put, Ruth. I think you're absolutely right. You're spot on. It is about that, isn't it? And you start to recognise the individuality in all living beings, and that becomes quite a powerful thing. Sure. Definitely.
Well, that's kind of getting to the end of our chat, even though I feel like we could chat for ages, and hopefully we will when we finally get to meet up. But before we sort of wrap up and say goodbye, I wonder if you can just kind of let people know how they can kind of follow what you're doing, and where they can get your book, and what's next. Is there anything next, or anything that you want to let people know, really? Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah. Well, look, I mean, the easiest way is the website, probably, which is just jamescanton.co.uk. That's it, everything's on there pretty much. Yeah, I mean, obviously, in terms of getting the book, it'd be great if people got a copy of the book. I'd love it. Get in touch with me on Instagram. Let me know how you're enjoying the book. That's great. I do post pictures every now and again of the book in various places. I had a great one from Afghanistan, a recent one from Sydney, you know, that kind of thing. So that's just been really nice. Yeah, if you can get it from your local bookseller, I always say that, you know, local to me, Redline Books and Culture are fantastic. They've got a fantastic deal going where if you want a book, I've agreed that I'll go in and sign copies. We've been a bit scuppered by lockdown, but I'm going to go in as soon as I can and sign some copies for Christmas, any messages you want, etc., etc. So yeah, that's a good one. Brilliant. Thank you so much, James. Thank you for taking the time. It's just been such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you. Lovely to see you, Ruth. Thank you. Again sometime soon, yeah? Definitely. Thank you. Cheers. And I'm just going to add on the end, so the rest of this week, I have got a live chat every night. Really exciting. So 8:30 p.m. every night, check in. Tomorrow I've got James from the Walk and Talk for Men project. Wednesday night, Ellen from Nature is a Human Right organisation. Thursday, James Roast, who is a psychotherapist and host of the podcast, The Happiness Algorithm. Friday night, Charlotte, who is a wellbeing practitioner and artist. Saturday night, I've got Indy Green, who is a young teenager, bird watching expert, nature representative, RSPB ambassador. And Sunday night, I've got Lucy Young, who is the author of Losing Eden. So really exciting week. So if you can join me, that'd be lovely. But I'll also be posting all the talks on my Instagram feed as well for you to watch later. So thank you.